Blitz Show. I'm Bruce Badgley, and as usual, I have my sidekick there, Ian McMeans. And Ian, why don't you introduce our very special guest this evening?
We are thrilled tonight to have Avonworth head coach Duke Johncore coming off back-to-back victories over Aliquippa and Thomas Jefferson. I mean, what a run in consecutive weeks, and not only beating those two storied programs, but winning the, as we called it, Battle of Champions, with TJ being the defending 4A champs and Avonworth being the defending 3A champions. So what a great matchup, what a great victory. And also, yeah, Avonworth did a very special thing to honor one of their past alumni before this game as well. So that was a pretty cool thing to see. Everything coming together for the Lopes program, which under Coach John Core has really taken off, going from a school that had some success in the playoffs, had made a couple runs to the semifinals, but Coach John Core's been there around 15 years now, I think, and has won
Yep.
now multiple WPIAL titles. Took them to the first championship game since 1959. Won the first WPIAL title since 1959. And did it in a progression too. I think that's part of the story is when Coach John Core took over the program, they were a single A school, and now they're up in 3A, and just beat two, premier 4A programs. So Coach, congrats on the big win, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm honored.
Yeah, well, we're very happy to have you. So, can you just talk a little bit about the journey that your program's been on here? You obviously won the WPIAL title last year, went all the way to the state title game, lost in overtime, and then came back this year, brought a lot of players back, and now have two big wins as you get ready to head into conference play in one of the most difficult conferences in the entire WPIAL.
Yeah, it was nice to get back there again to the state championship game. We've had some success over the years. We played in the championship in 2014 and got beat by a really good Clareton team in single A. Made it in 19. We went undefeated in the WPIAL and made it all the way to the state championship to face one of the best teams in the entire state that year. I think they went 6A with Southern Columbia. They had six Division I athletes. Just an unreal team. We got killed in that state championship game, and then to face 2 years consecutively Bell Vernon in 22 and 23. That they ended up winning the state championship, and to fall short those 2 years in 22 and 23, and then to finally get it in 24 was a great accomplishment. So we were very fortunate and blessed to win it last year, and to go out to Cumberland Valley and lose in overtime was just heartbreaking. So we've had a good run. We're fortunate, we're blessed, and just happy to be an Antelope coach.
Antelopes. Yeah, I love that. I love
It's not very fearsome.
that's okay. One of the things too is, obviously you've had these two big games early in the season. And, obviously a lot of emotion going on there. Now you're going to start your conference schedule, and that how do you guard against your team maybe peaking too early? I mean, you obviously have lofty goals well beyond a regular season. So how do you kind of temper the enthusiasm?
We tell them 1 week at a time. Our motto is, who do we face next week? It's not looking ahead. It's not looking towards, the playoffs or it's just 1 week at a time. Right now, our focus is Hopewell, and they're a very talented team. You probably read and heard about their quarterback getting multiple offers today. He's a special athlete, and I think I lost you for.
No, I think we got you.
Okay, I don't know what happened. You still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Well, I can't. Something happened on mine. But anyway, he's a special athlete, and he's a talent that you have to really prepare for him. He's that good, And so we're all eyes are on Hopewell, and then it's Central Valley. So 1 week at a time is our motto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ian?
So one of the things that we like to do on this show is to try and give shout outs to the people who don't necessarily always get the headlines. It's really easy to find headlines and stats for quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, all that. But you guys really shut down TJ's running game. So I'd like to, give you an opportunity to shout out to the guys in the trenches, your offensive and defensive line. If you want to get their names out there a little bit, because they really led the way for you guys last year, getting all the way to the state title with what you were able to do. And, this year too, obviously shutting down TJ's running game and Tyler Eber holding him in check was a big accomplishment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our kids have been playing really well. They had a lot of battle experience last year. I mean, our O-line starts with Pete Bonnet. He's a Navy commit. He's a big, strong offensive tackle, probably 6'5". Just a talented player that does a great job for us, Our H-backs are playing extremely well. That's Marco Arlia and Bryce Metz. They're blocking extremely well. Evan Lausenheiser comes in and blocks at tight end. So we have three body types that are tight end, H-back type of personnel to complement our offensive line. We have 4 returning O-linemen from last year's team. So we have Harrison McAfee that moved from guard out to tackle. Brad Hines, they were sophomores last year and went to the state championship and played. Brad's our center. He's a junior this year. And we have Tyler Haney, who's a returning guard that started last year. So we have 4 returning linemen. And then Noah Neese is a sophomore guard that's playing for us. So we'll return 3 of these linemen next year.
Wow. Incredible. And last year, let's talk a little bit about going back, and you received a lot of accolades last year from everywhere, it seemed like. Talk a little bit about how you kind of those type of awards or whatever like that, you kind of bring that into the whole team concept, and kind of make that part of the team rather than yourself.
Yeah, and that's our motto is at Avonworth. It's not about you, it's about us. And the accolades and the awards, that's just as much every assistant coach's award as it is mine. I have guys that are in the trenches every day doing their individual work and perfecting the craft and the technique of these athletes. And it's not a one-man show. Yes, I am the head coach, but it's a team effort. And when I tell people, they're like, well, who calls the offense? I'm like, well, 4 of us call the offense. It kind of gets chaotic at times, and people are like, well, who calls the defense? And I'm like, well, 3 of us call the defense. We work together as a cohesive unit, and it works. I mean, it's not the typical format that you would see within a high school program. Mike White was asking me that today. And so what we do is it just works, and it's not about you as an individual. I mean, those accolades are nice, but those don't mean much to me. I just enjoy the kids. I enjoy the relationships. I enjoy my coaches. And that's what it's about. It's developing relationships and creating memories, so the awards and the accolades, and that's filtered through into our team. We have athletes that, sometimes it's their week and sometimes it's not their week to get the ball or to make the splash plays. And, it doesn't matter. There's not selfishness within the locker room. And that's a beautiful thing.
I think that really speaks to something I've noticed kind of, from afar watching your program over the last decade or so, is that it always seems like Avonworth is able to be multiple, and as multiple guys can beat you, and at any given time you can run the ball, you can throw the ball. You've always had talented quarterbacks, but you can always mix in 2 or 3 different running backs. And your run to the state championship last year, it seemed like a different back was leading the way every week. And this year it's kind of been the same with Dimitri and Luca and Carson all having good games here and there. But I think that speaks to the depth of talent that you have, and just the willingness to be flexible, kind of depending on who the opponent is and what you need to do to win. So you did mention your assistant coaches too. So I asked about the offensive line, but if you want to talk a little bit about your assistant coaches too, we are more than willing to hear about them.
Yeah, well, it starts in my right-hand man, Dan Cuban. He's been with me for years. He came on as a volunteer years ago when my son was playing. He's just a phenomenal guy. I mean, he does everything for me. His kid played for me. His son's playing at Gannon right now. Dan's a wide receivers coach and a D-back coach. Just a great all-around guy. He's phenomenal. Love every bit of who he is as a person. He's a teacher. He's an educator. I mean, most all of my guys are teachers. The only group that doesn't have a teacher is the O-line group. So maybe that's why they're so nasty. A former player of mine, I'll go to the O-line next. A former player of mine kind of heads up the O-line, Vince Bevilacqua. He's within our community. He grew up here, was raised here. doesn't live here now, but he's committed to coach for us. He does a great job. Lance Hilliard works with him on the O-line and is the D-line coach. He's a community guy. He runs a car mechanic shop in town here locally, and he's a great guy. And then Dan Rossman lives in the community and is a taxpayer here and has volunteered his time for the last 4 or 5 years, and he does a great job. So our O-line and D-line are actually coached by three different guys, and they do a phenomenal job.
Wow.
I brought Vertus Jones over from North Hills. I kept asking him to come back or to come on staff and coach, and he agreed to do that. He's doing running backs and linebackers with me, and he's a head coach. He's a head wrestling coach, just the salt of the earth, very humble. Was a national one national runner-up in the wrestling realm at WVU, just an absolute stud of an athlete, and he just brings so much to our program.
Wow.
And then the D-backs, I have Bill Weinberg, who does the defensive backs, and he helps coordinate all the defense with me, and he does a great job. He's energetic, enthusiastic, so he does a phenomenal job. My son and my father do the quarterbacks, and they work together well on that. My 83-year-old dad and my son do the quarterbacks. And I have a volunteer, Nico Neal, who's also working with the running backs and linebackers, the Neal brother that was, made the state championship run last year. So Nico's coaching with us this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's been great. And then we have another volunteer, Sam Paladin, who's new this year. It just brings a lot of knowledge and expertise to the program as well. So, yeah, my coaches are great.
Wow, that's fantastic. And even though you've had, obviously some big wins and what have you, each year, it's a different group of guys and what have you. So how would you say the team is as far as your expectations on chemistry so far? I mean, are you 50%, 75%, 100%?
This is a very strong group of seniors. Oh, and I left out one guy, my strength coach. He does weight training for us every Monday, and he has these kids all summer. So Phil Coffin does an amazing job with our strength and conditioning program, and I think that's a lot of what separates us. The mentality that they have from his leadership. So yeah, it's great. In terms of the cohesiveness, this group is one of the most unselfish groups that I've had, and they do a phenomenal job. They bought in. You think about it. This group of seniors, they know nothing less than Heinz Field. They lost to Bell Vernon as freshmen. They lost to Bell Vernon as freshmen, lost to Bell Vernon as sophomores. They won it against Central Valley as juniors, and now they're seniors. And we tell them all the time, your story is unwritten. So keep writing your story. And they're a great group of leaders. I don't know how their parents afford it. They go out to dinner almost every night. Where are we going tonight? Moe's. And they take young kids with them, and they take different kids on the team to go with them. So it's neat to see.
Wow, good stuff. Ian, final question for Coach.
Yeah, that's really cool. Kind of having a group that kind of passes on the tradition of the program too. That's not you said how unselfish they were. I think that really stands out. That it's your program's been able to build that tradition of passing things on. You've got former players coming back to coach for you, and all that just to kind of keep everything rolling along. And the other thing I was going to ask about too, from the time you started through now at Avonworth, have you seen, the cohesiveness with the youth program? Because we always see that, when you're able to build cohesion with the youth program, the middle school program coming up to high school, that just puts those programs and those schools that much farther along. When those players get to high school, because they've been playing together for so long. So, you want to talk about your youth program a little bit?
Yeah, I'm kind of hands off with the youth program. They do a phenomenal job. I know a lot of the coaches, but I know some schools, they go down and they teach them their system. They teach them, this is what we do. This is how we do it. I'm a firm believer in coaching to your personnel. And so if you have a stud quarterback, you should throw the ball and don't fit that kid into a wing T offense. And so with the youth program, they're so young and the coaches know their players. So for me to go down and say, hey, do this and do that, I rub shoulders with those guys. I talk to them. In fact, Luke Neal's dad is one of the youth coaches. We go down and pass out T-shirts each year. But they do a phenomenal job. Our Eagles program has been extremely successful. It's a great organization. It's well run. It's well led. And I can say nothing but good things about that youth program down there. And they do feed us. they give us some really knowledgeable, well-schooled athletes to develop even further. So they do a great job of starting the progression of these kids up into the varsity program.
Wow.
That's great.
Fantastic.
Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight, Coach.
Yeah.
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Congrats
on
Coach.
the big wins.
Best of luck the rest of the year.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you.
All right. Just exit out there and we'll carry on. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. So I've got to say, I absolutely love the fact that he has so many assistant coaches that like grew up in the community and live in the community and are former players, because one of the great things about high school football is that like it's kids representing their community, right? That it's communities coming together around the football team, which is kind of, you know, the representation of that town, right? And having so many people that live in the community, that work in the community, that have businesses in the community, that are teachers in the school, that grew up there, right? That just shows the level of investment all those people have in continuing to see their community be great and continuing to see the football program, which represents their community, be great. So I love to see that. That's awesome.
Avonworth checks all the boxes. I mean, for a successful program, you can understand why Coach John Coor has been successful. Look, he won those awards because of the culture that he's created around Avonworth football, and and we were talking a little bit before we got on air. I can't understand why people seem surprised that they're having success. I mean, it seems, wow, they beat the Aliquippa. Oh, wow, they beat, Thomas Jefferson. Oh, wow, they have a solid program from the ground up with great coaching and fantastic leadership. And you know what? That means wins in high school football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think really what they've been able to do over the last 10 to 15 years, you'd be hard pressed to say that they're not one of the top 10 programs in the WPIAL. They may not have the sort of tradition of, a lot of other programs dating back to, the 40s, 50s, 60s, like we always talk about on our, historical look backs. And, you see names you recognize from back then through now, right? Like Aliquippa and Clareton and things like that. But for the last 10 to 15 years since Coach John Coor got there, they have absolutely been among one of the top programs in the WPIAL. And I think these two wins, yeah. And I think these two wins the last 2 weeks really, solidify it. And absolutely they belong in the same conversation as the Thomas Jeffersons and the Aliquippas of the world. And I think also, Coach John Coor brought up about the 2 losses to Bell Vernon. Bell Vernon was a 4A team, moved down to 3A for 2 years, and then moved back up to 4A. They were like right on that threshold. I think they were like, below the line by like 1 or 2. And like they didn't do anything wrong, right? It's what their enrollment was. They were below the line, but just like a couple, and then they were like back above the line by like 1 or 2. Like they were right around the cutoff line. But like if the cutoff line had been somewhere else and Bell Vernon had never moved down, like we could be talking about Aliquippa as like 3-time WPIAL champs, 2-time state champs, something like that, right? Like, because like Coach said, they lost to Bell Vernon in the finals, and then Bell Vernon went on to win the state title 2 years in a row. So like they're right there.
They are. All right. Speaking of being right there right now, I think we got a lot of people watching the show. So let's go ahead right here, right now.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this week's edition of the WPIAL Blitz Show. This is week 4. This will be the 5th game of the season with week 0. So after this week, we'll be halfway through the season, which is kind of hard to believe that we've made
that.
That
is just like,
this far
I
already.
can't believe that. I just can't believe that.
It's wild how fast this season has gone. So if you're watching the show, you've obviously found us on YouTube. You can check us out on our other social media accounts, as well as my WPIAL Games of the Week and WPIAL Standings page on SteelCityBlitz.com. Did my first Games of the Week article last week, now that we're into conference play, and we'll have the standings page is fully updated, and it'll continue to be updated every Friday night with all the results. And now as we're moving into conference play, we'll start to talk about the road to the playoffs as well. So let's talk about some key results. Obviously, the biggest win of the week, Avonworth's win over Thomas Jefferson, tops the list. 41-14 too. Avonworth got a couple defensive scores that stretched it out, but really TJ returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown, and it was all Avonworth after that. That Avonworth really just shut down Thomas Jefferson's offense in an incredibly impressive performance. Woodland Hills beat Penn Trafford, got 2 kick return touchdowns from their star wide receiver, Scoop Smith. And Steel Valley with a massive win over South Park, putting Steel Valley right back in the list of contenders for 2A. I mean, we've talked about how 2A is wide open, right? I thought maybe Steel Valley could beat South Park, but beating them 56-7 was just like,
well,
eye-opening.
everybody I was getting a lot of grief by not having them number 1 in 1A2 South Park. I mean, everybody, it was an overriding factor that South Park was, that good. Well, I'm not saying that this is, sheds or casts a shadow on the rest of their season, but maybe a harsh dose of reality there.
Yeah, and in South Park, being the defending WPIAL champions, had been on a roll, and I think that them losing their conference opener to Steel Valley is a little bit eye-opening. But Steel Valley, we talked about them last week after they lost to Bishop Canavan at home, which was their first home loss in like 4 or 5 years. And we were like, should we start worrying about Steel Valley here? And apparently after the game, Duron Barksdale, their star quarterback, running back, do it all, everything, wide receiver sometimes, he was kind of like, no, we needed this. This opened our eyes to what we're doing wrong. We're going to fix this, and like, just watch what we do next week. And he went out and scored like 5 touchdowns. So,
yeah.
In this game, it was a big performance for Steel Valley. 2 games of the week, both ones that came down to the wire. Beaver against Hopewell. Coach John Core mentioned Hopewell's quarterback. We'll, spoiler alert, talk more about him in a minute. But back and forth game between Beaver and Hopewell. Hopewell scored on the final play of the game and then went for 2 in the win instead of kicking the extra point to go to overtime, and they came up short on the 2-point conversion. But in a 51-50 game, like, you might as well go for 2 and try and win it, right? Like,
you can never fault that.
Yeah. I love the aggressiveness of you score a touchdown as time expires, you go for 2 in the win, and if you get it, you win, and if not, then you don't make your players play more. They've already played a lot. And then Cornell scored a last minute touchdown to beat Burgettstown as well. So those were the 2 games of the week. The upset of the week, winless Shaler got off the schneid by beating Plum in their conference opener, and Plum had been 2-1, and a team I was kind of looking at like, oh, maybe they could make a run into the playoffs this year. But then Shaler came out and beat him, and I was like, oh, maybe I was, misrepresenting Shaler. So
there's a lot of volatility on who's who yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't beat yourself up over that.
Yeah, it was a surprise though. I was not expecting that result. So that one definitely gets the upset of the week. And I think really 5A in particular, you've got like, 5 or 6 truly elite teams there. And then you've got a bunch of other teams that you're like, I'm not quite sure, 12 teams are going to make the playoffs, but I'm not quite sure like where they're all going to slot in and who's going to start to separate themselves. So conference play in 5A is going to get really interesting here, especially in the Big East and the Northeast Conference. I think and it's going to be interesting in the Allegheny 6 too, because all those teams are so good. Like Baldwin is terrible, but the other 5 teams are all really good. So between Peters Township, Upper St. Clair, South Fayette, Bethel Park, Moon, they all have to play each other, and there's going to be great games there week after week after week once they get into conference play.
Yes, they will.
Yep. A couple other noteworthy results. Aliquippa and Mars were locked in a tight game, and Aliquippa emerged victorious with a couple late touchdowns. Clairton shutting out Greensburg Central Catholic, who had kind of been the top challenger to them in the Eastern Conference, and they just Greensburg Central Catholic had 4 yards of offense. 4 yards. That like they had 44 yards passing and -4 yards or -40 yards rushing. Like -40 yards rushing. Like it's
And do they count sacks as rushes
I
too? I
think they
believe
count sacks as
so.
rushing yards. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
they
the
had
only way that happens.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think Clairton had 4 or 5 sacks and then a whole bunch of tackles for loss. And yeah, but Greensburg Central Catholic had 4 yards of total offense in that game, which is just
Wow.
ludicrous. And then Bentworth, a team that I've been talking about, of like, can they take the next step in the Tri-County South this year? They were leading California until like the middle of the fourth quarter when California went down and scored a touchdown and 2-point conversion to win that one. So my Bentworth team, who was one of my like, this might be a great story, came up a little bit short against
Yeah, we root for the stories, don't we?
yeah, yes we do, against one of the powerhouses of the TCS. So I wanted to revisit this because last week we had 4 teams on our panic watch, right? That we talked about. Is it time to panic yet? So I wanted to revisit what they did this week. And
That's really good stuff, man.
yeah, and 3 of the 4 won, all 3 of them winning significantly. But Franklin Regional fell to 0-4 with a loss to Latrobe. So for a Franklin Regional team that's made the playoffs, I don't remember the exact number. I think it's like 20 out of the last 22 years or something insane like that.
They're in trouble, baby.
They might be in a little bit of trouble here, sitting at 0-4. So
Well, the panic button has been pressed. The question is whether the parachute is gonna unfold. I mean, because they're heading right to the pavement.
yeah. Yeah, they'll have some opportunities as we go through conference play, but I think they're definitely one that should be concerned right now.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so I mentioned Hopewell's quarterback. Coach John Core mentioned Hopewell's quarterback, and he is in a losing effort. James Armstrong is our player of the week. That
We've never had a losing effort player be player of the week, have we?
I don't
I don't
think
recall
so,
ever.
but he put up 600 yards and 6
Oh
touchdowns.
no,
Like
I'm not
I
I'm not arguing that he shouldn't. I'm
yeah.
just saying that this is a first for the Blitz show.
I think it very well may be, but this is a performance that deserves recognition because this kid's only a sophomore and he did literally everything in his power to try and will his team to victory.
Hmm.
And Coach John Core talked about how good he is and that he's just gotten some, a handful of Division I offers. I think Pitt, West Virginia, North Carolina, a couple others offered him this week. But I mean, 346 passing yards, 263 rushing yards, 6 total touchdowns, like 600 yards of offense and 6 touchdowns in one game. In one, like, absurd.
That used to be a season when I was in high school.
Yeah, right. So thanks to the magic of Twitter here. We do have some highlights that he posted. But yeah, so this was a WPIAL record-setting performance for total yards with his 600-yard performance. So we've got some highlights here that are maybe a little bit small, but you can see just running around and through Beaver's whole defense.
Wow, I'm gonna have to follow him.
Yes. And I mean, with a name like Armstrong, that's the best name for a quarterback, right? Like
And what is it? Armstrong _ QB.
Armstrong _ QB.
I don't
Yep.
think I've
James
ever done this
Armstrong,
on the show either. Is
sophomore from
follow
Hopewell,
somebody on.
6 touchdown performance, 600 total yards. Just incredible effort. So congratulations to our player of the week, James
All right,
Armstrong from Hopewell.
followed him live on the show. Okay.
There we go. Getting that WPIAL Blitz show bump. So some of our other top performers this week, included another player in that game, Junior Marino, wide receiver from Beaver, who had 216 receiving yards, a touchdown, and a pick six in the fourth quarter, which wound up being the final score that Beaver put on the board, and then Hopewell had to come back and try and win it. So Junior Marino, great performance from Beaver. Duron Barksdale, I mentioned him from Steel Valley. 165 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, a receiving touchdown, and a fumble return touchdown on defense. Tristan Tavares in a big win for Norwin over Seneca Valley, potentially putting Norwin into the conversation for the 6A playoff race. 5 total touchdowns from him. Kymone Brown from Jeanette with 6 total touchdowns, 142 rushing yards, 102 passing yards. And then 2 guys this week scored multiple non-offensive touchdowns. Scoop Smith, who I mentioned from Woodland Hills, returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns in their big win over Penn Trafford. And then Danny King from Freeport had 2 pick sixes in the same game, which, how about that? Like two pick sixes in the same game. That's something else as well. So in keeping with WPIAL Blitz show tradition, where I say, if you score 6 touchdowns, I will show your highlights. Here are some highlights from Kymone Brown from Jeanette in his 6 touchdown performance against Fraser this week.
Wow, good run there.
Yep, just running through
and
Fraser's
down the
defense.
sideline he goes.
Yep. This was his 3rd rushing touchdown, and this is a kid who can do it all on both sides of the ball too. Nice open field tackle here on defense. Another one on defense. So overall, just another great performance. And we're happy to be able to highlight these guys. So yes, as I've said before, if you score 6 touchdowns, I will show your highlights on the show.
Wow,
all right. So moving on to our streak watch. Oops, actually we're one ahead there. Okay, so because the WPIAL did not have a state champion last year, there were 2 teams that had winning streaks at the end of last year. West Mifflin and Carmichael's won their last 3 games last season, but did not make the playoffs, so they ended last year with winning streaks. But they have both now lost this year after Carmichael's lost last week. So I did not include overall winning streak this week because there are 13 undefeated teams remaining. So those are the ones that have the current longest active winning streak, those 13 teams. So I switched gears and went with wins versus WPIAL opponents. Wins, not counting their losses in the state playoffs. Fort Cherry has gone 2 seasons of completely undefeated against WPIAL competition, unbeaten in the regular season and through the playoffs, and now are still undefeated this year. Thomas Jefferson and South Park, though, 2 defending champions going down this week, with TJ losing to Avonworth and then South Park losing to Steel Valley. And then on the losing streak side, this is overall losing streaks, not just losing streaks versus WPIAL opponents. But all those teams lost once again this week. None of them were particularly close. Hopefully some of these teams can get off the schneid soon, because once you start to talk about 18, 19, 20 games, I mean that's 2 years without winning a football game, which gets tough on kids, gets tough on a program. So
it gets tough on the school, because the football program is what kind of sets the kind of emotional tone for a school for the whole year.
Yeah. And I know a few of these schools on the losing streak side have struggled with getting players to come out for the team, right? They're just low on numbers, and when you're low on numbers, it's hard to pick up wins and hard to compete. I went to a game on Friday night, and it was Seton LaSalle against Charleroi, and Seton had probably twice as many players as Charleroi did, right? So it's tough to compete when you just don't have the same kind of numbers as another team does, in the same classification, right? Because that was a conference game for those 2. But it's tough to compete. So congratulations to the teams that kept their winning streaks rolling, and good luck next week to the active losing streak teams. Hopefully you can get off the
Get off the
schneid.
schneid.
Yep. All right. And then on the conference game side, Neshannock actually entered the year with the longest active conference winning streak. Their game last week against Rochester was postponed. Rochester started the season very short on players. I heard they had under 20 players on their roster to start the year, didn't have enough healthy guys. So if they go without being able to make up that game, which most likely they won't be able to, it'll go down as a forfeit for Rochester. But for now, it's just listed as postponed. And initially, like they were supposed to play Friday, they postponed it to Saturday, and then just got canceled altogether. So, nevertheless, Fort Cherry, Clairton, Central Catholic, all continuing on, and Amani Christian all continuing on their conference winning streaks. McKeesport's played a non-conference game, so that doesn't count towards their conference winning streaks. As far as the active losing streaks go, all these teams either continued their streak or played a non-conference game. Indiana did win this week. They beat Laurel Highlands, but that was a non-conference game, so they're still
72-0. Oh my!
Yeah, that was a pretty brutal defeat. Amani Christian is really good. I think Amani had multiple like defensive and punt return touchdowns in that game. So
did you see the score? I don't know. I I don't know if it was this week or last week where York High won 91-0.
Wow.
The Thursday night game. I mean, 91-0. I mean, it was crazy.
And York High is what, 4A?
6A.
6A. Oh, they're 6A.
Yeah, I can't remember top of my head who they beat 91-0.
Wow.
But
And that's
I can't ever. I mean, I've seen 80-point games, but
I've seen 84 a couple times, but I think
91-0. I've got to find out who that was against. Since I brought it up, my bad for.
And that's one of those things when you get, the schools in bigger classifications, like they put their freshmen and sophomores in the game, but like, you don't want to. You're not going to just take a knee when you're on offense, right? You're at least going to like hand the ball off and run the ball and get get the young kids some reps. And like they're out there competing and trying to score. And if the other team can't tackle you, then like it's one thing to me, there's a difference. If you're out there in the second half of a mercy rule game throwing the ball, like that's not great sportsmanship. But if you're out there just running the ball, like I think it's worse if you just like take a knee, right? Like you want to let those kids get out there and compete.
They beat Northeastern 91-0.
Wow.
And Northeastern it's a 5A school. I mean, they came into the game. Well, Northeastern was having some trouble.
I'll say.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Northeastern Bobcats, they're 5A school. They're Section 1 of the York Adams League down that way, and they lost their last two games by a combined total of 134-0.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I don't mean to get down on Northeastern there, but they're having a tough season.
Yeah.
So and so we should move on from Valley because
yes. All right, we will move on. So let's talk about our rankings.
Oh
here.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So we debuted these rankings last week, and next week we will have the debut of the WPIAL Blitz Show statewide power rankings.
All right.
So,
yeah.
I like to get 4 or 5 games into the data
you need
set.
that.
Yeah.
You need that.
So that's next week we'll have those, but for this week we have our subjective rankings, and next week we'll have my statistical ones. 5A, 6A, all those teams won. They stayed the same. Both of us elevated Avonworth to our top team in our 3A, 4A rankings. both of us have mostly the same teams. I have Aliquippa up there. You've got Freeport up there. Freeport's been very impressive in 3A as well. So yeah, but mostly the same here for us in the 3A, 4A ranks.
I think there's a lot to talk about 2A and 1A. That's the one
Yeah.
that kind of took it on the chin last week. I
Yeah.
mean, for the teams that we had. Now, Fort Cherry and Clairton, we agree on that, but I don't think we've ever had a poll where we had so much disagreement.
Yeah. And I will say that, I usually approach this as, if the teams went out and played, who do I think would win? And South Allegheny is undefeated. They've been very impressive this year. We both rank them. I think we have both been impressed by, what the Gladiators have done. Coach Hansen over there has done a great job turning that program around. He was on our show last year, so shout out to him. And then you ranked two teams from the Tri-County South in 1A, Jefferson Morgan and Avella. And Jefferson Morgan's been really good this year, don't get me wrong. Whereas I ranked Western Beaver from the 2A Midwestern Conference. They're off to a 4-0 start. And I actually have Bishop Canavan, who I know is only sitting at 2-2.
Yeah,
but
that's
they beat,
surprising.
Here was my logic, right? Was I had South Park ranked last week. South Park just got smoked by Steel Valley, who lost to Bishop Canavan the week before. And Bishop Canavan also beat Laurel, who was my number 5 team last week. So I was like, Bishop Canavan has a win over a team I had in my top 5 last week. And they beat the team that smoked the team that I also had in my top 5. So I was like, this is a really good team that just, has 2 losses on their plate. And one was that Clarkson North team in one of those showcase events. So like, do we even really want to count that?
Tell me why I picked Freeport over Aliquippa.
Oh yeah, we can go back to that one.
Because Freeport's undefeated. And Aliquippa, a loss there. I think that everybody that I've got in my top 5 in 4A and 3A is undefeated, where I think Aliquippa only has 1 loss, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, okay, so I stayed with the undefeateds.
You did. You stuck with the undefeateds. I had both Aliquippa and Mars ranked last week, and Aliquippa beat Mars, so I couldn't take them out of the rankings because they, still they beat another ranked team, and I had them ranked. So.
I would expect I would expect there's going to be a lot of volatility. Other than I think for Avonworth and Amani, I think there could be a lot of volatility in the 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A rankings this year.
I think there very well could be. Yeah. And I think 2A especially is just wide open. And next week, in addition to the statistical rankings, next week we'll also start to talk about the conference standings and things like that. Because with just one conference game this past week, it wasn't really worth running through every conference. But we'll get to that next week as well, and we'll start to see as these things play out, like just how wide open some of these things.
The content just grows.
It does. It does. Yeah. Yes, the content does grow as the season goes on. But we like to be informative. So as I mentioned, this week is week 4, so this will be the last week of non-conference play for a lot of teams. After this week, pretty much everyone will be into conference play. Some teams will have another conference game this week. Some teams won't. There's some conferences that have played no conference games so far, whereas some will have already played 2 after this week. So this is the last week of kind of the split in the schedule. And after this, everything will start to come back together. But this is kind of getting to, after this week's games, it is the midway point in the season. So, looking forward, these games all matter towards the playoff race. So let's talk about some of our games of the week. North Allegheny beat fellow 6A undefeated Hempfield last week, and now they get a game against Norwin, who's coming off a big win over Seneca Valley. So North Allegheny, having to go through another kind of up-and-coming team that's looking to put themselves in position to be a playoff contender. We'll see how that goes. In 5A, believe it or not, this is the only 5A matchup this week between 2 5A teams that are both 500 or better.
Sometimes those weeks happen. That was last week out east here. It was really hard. This week was much easier, but last week, you just don't get the matchups.
Yep. So Plum looking to bounce back from that loss to Shaler last week, whereas Pine Richland looking to continue on their run for, another run at another WPIAL title. And Pine Richland, I still think, is the best team in 5A. Their only loss so far was to Central Catholic in 6A. So Pine Richland is absolutely loaded and will continue on.
Yeah, and didn't they get a favorable ruling on one of their receivers today that
They
he's eligible
did.
for the playoffs?
Yes,
Let's talk
Khalil
about that
Taylor.
a little bit.
Yeah, Khalil Taylor, Penn State commit, transferred from Seton LaSalle to Pine Richland. From what I read, supposedly his dad lives in Pine Richland area, so he interestingly transferred from Seton, which is in the South Hills, up to Pine Richland, which is in the North Hills. But nevertheless, he was initially ruled as, the initial ruling was that he did not transfer for academic reasons. He was allowed to play, but he was going to be ineligible for the playoffs based on the, transfer rules that the PIAA has. But then just today it came out that he is eligible for the playoffs. There was a ruling on that based on whatever available evidence they used to make those decisions. So yes, Khalil Taylor will be eligible for the playoffs, which I think is good, because I think it's stupid to be like, oh, well, you can play in the regular season, but once the playoffs roll around, your team's built all this chemistry, they figured all these things out, and now nope, you got to sit it out. You can't play. Like, it's stupid. Just let the kids play, right? Like, I kind of feel like just let the kids play. You only get so many opportunities in high school
Exactly.
to play
I mean, they
football.
only get
And
so many opportunities here.
right.
Come on, let's be real. I mean,
Yeah.
let's see. The problem is that we always say, let's just all be adults, but unfortunately, nobody nobody ever wants to be an adult about that. It's always very emotional and very parochial in how those decisions come down.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this with Bob Long when we had him on in the season preview show. And like, to me, high school is totally different than college, right? Where college, you can have guys in their fifth, sixth year of eligibility still playing. High
Yeah.
school, you get 4 years and that's it, right? Like, just making a kid sit out for a year for a playoff run, whatever, like, that's taking away an opportunity for that kid to, you know, go out, perform for
And
scouts, put things on tape, potentially get college offers,
yeah, but there's no
and it's
guarantee that the kid is going to play in college. So let him
right,
play in high
right, or
school.
just right, exactly, and even for the kids who aren't, college
Christ.
recruits, like,
That's
just
the
let the
thing
kids
is,
play.
like, it's not like this guy's moving on to the pros and can play till he's 30 years old. This might be it. Let him play.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm glad that he will be eligible to play, and I wish I wish everyone could just be able to, go out and play. That would be
Be an
nice.
adult.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, our 4A game of the week, Mars taking on Montour in a battle of 2, 3, and 1 teams. This is a non-conference game, but also kind of a big one for the 4A playoff race, because Mars just lost to Aliquippa, who's in Montour's conference. So I think it is kind of an important one in the playoff race here in 4A, because only 8 teams make the playoffs in 4A. So, these non-conference games could come into play whenever whatever happens, if you're seeding, if you're trying to decide wild cards, whatever else, like, these games may matter. In 3A, Avonworth, coming off their big victory over Thomas Jefferson, now takes on a Hopewell team who just lit it up this past week, against Beaver, coming up short, but still put up 50 points. So going to be a big matchup between Avonworth and Hopewell, Avonworth's first conference game there. And then South Allegheny taking on South Park. South Park looking to bounce back from their loss to Steel Valley, now having to play South Allegheny, who's a undefeated team. So that's another big game in 2A in the Allegheny Conference. 1A, a whole bunch of games between teams with very good records, so I've just put them all on here. Undefeated matchup between Monessen and Fort Cherry, Jeanette and Leechburg. Considering how Clareton just dispatched Greensburg Central Catholic, the winner of this one kind of sets themselves up as like the next potential challenger to Clairton in that conference. Cornell taking on Bishop Canavan. The winner there probably sets themselves up as the top challenger to Fort Cherry in their conference. And then California coming off that win over Bentworth, taking on undefeated Avella at 4-0. So that's another noteworthy matchup there in the Tri-County South. And then two non-conference games that I think are noteworthy. McKeesport taking on Upper St. Clair just because of the prestige of those two programs. And Ringgold taking on Southmoreland. This one is more of a, I can't believe we're talking about these two teams having these records. Southmoreland being 4-0, Ringgold being 3-1. You know, it wasn't that long ago that these two teams were considered bottom feeders in their conference, and both of them have had really good turnarounds. Southmoreland's kind of been slowly building, you know, over the last 5-6 years, whereas Ringgold, it's been a turnaround over the last couple of years. So pretty cool stories there in a non-conference game.
Absolutely.
Oops. There we go. So our week 4 broadcast from friends of the show, KDKA News team radio high school football game of the week will be the Mars Montour game that we talked about, which is our 4A game of the week. And then our friends at WMBS out of Uniontown are doing the Mount Pleasant Laurel Highlands game, which is a non-conference game before conference play starts for Laurel Highlands in their conference in 4A. All right, so now I'll turn it over to you to talk about your news.
Turn it over to
East.
me. I guess the first thing is the two games that I'll be doing for PennLive this week. Thursday night, tune in. It's Steel High and Susquehanna Township, who is loaded. Couple of, I mean, that's a real top flight matchup on a standalone Thursday night. So if you're looking for a Thursday night good football game, Steel High and Susquehanna Township, we've got that. And then Friday night, Ephrata against Elizabethtown, and Elizabethtown is one of these stories here out east. I think that they want to combine 3 games the previous 2 years, now at 3-1, facing Ephrata at 3-1. Solid program there. Coach Chris Miller there with Ephrata has done a great job over the years. So those are my broadcasts, football broadcasts, upcoming this weekend. And week 3 key results. Susquehanna Township defeated remained undefeated, beating on West Perry, who was undefeated coming into the game. A real wild shootout between Shamokin and Jersey Shore, 43-42. A couple of 4A teams that I think you're going to hear about coming down the stretch. Wyoming area over Lakeland. Wyomissing just keeps on rolling. One of the top players in the state, Justice Hardy, had a big game there. He just got offered by Temple today. Coatesville, boy, they are back with a vengeance. 28-13. Coatesville, my pick for District 1 6A supremacy. And the week 4 games of interest, I talked about Steel High and Susquehanna Township. Coatesville playing an undefeated Westchester East. So very interesting there. Parkland against Nazareth, undefeated 6A out of District 11. And another District 1 game, Strathaven against Haverford High. So some game day men's health, fresh set of downs, badge news from the East, tidbits.
Excellent. All right, so
I like the East tidbits, throwing them in there.
Yeah, it's good for us to include it with the WPIAL stuff because it's good for people to kind of be aware of what's happening around the state too as we build towards the state
just there a little, just a one slide. That's all we need.
Yep. So our look back. Now we go to 1955, thanks to our friends at PA Football History. Aliquippa won their second straight championship, coming back from a 13-0 fourth quarter deficit to beat Mount Lebanon. And actually, thanks to the wonderful magic of YouTube, I actually found highlights from the game, if you could believe it.
Gosh.
So here we go. Back Aliquippa wearing the red helmets here. Mount Lebanon on defense. So at this point, the game was 13-7, with just a couple minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. Aliquippa backed up in their own territory and runs a halfback toss that they chuck down the field for the game-winning touchdown. Game played at Pitt Stadium back in the day. And
Wow.
yeah, they had run the play once before that season, earlier in the year, and Aliquippa going on top and beating
Look at the
Mount
size of that
Lebanon.
crowd.
Yeah, it was packed. I mean, this was, then the game winning extra point for Aliquippa to win the WPIAL title, win their second WPIAL title. So pretty
Look
cool.
at the size of that crowd.
Yeah, I mean, back at the old Pitt Stadium, they would pack them in there, and
Look at that, the fans running,
yep, running down on
storming the
benches.
field already.
Yep.
Did they have face masks?
I think
It doesn't look like it.
I'm not sure, but so on this Aliquippa team, it included both Don Yanessa, who went on to coach the Quips for a number of years, but also
Mike Ditka?
Mike Ditka, yeah, I was gonna say a young tight end named Mike Ditka. I think
Wow.
he was either a sophomore or a junior on this team. I don't
Get the
remember
hell
which
out.
one.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Look at there. Pulled that out of my hat.
Yep. But yeah, this was a young Mike Ditka
Mike Ditka
Aliquippa
going
team.
down to or beating at Mount Lebo. Incredible.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yes. So people who want to see the whole game can go on YouTube and watch it. So thanks to the Aliquippa School District account for having that gem of history posted there. Braddock was awarded the Class A title. So how this worked was there was a Gardner points system that gave you points based on who you beat and what their records were and so on and so forth. And if two teams were tied in Gardner points, they played a championship game. If one team just had more than everybody else, then they were awarded the title. So Braddock was awarded the Class A title for having more Gardner points than everybody else. They had tied Midland the year before for the championship, but this was part of their dynasty of the mid-1950s where they won like 55 straight games or something and won 6 straight WPIAL titles.
Wow.
This year they won all 9 of their games by 12 plus points. And then Snowden in the Class B championship beat Neville 32-13. So Snowden Township became South Park Township. They had just changed the name of their whole township in the 1970s. And then Neville is now part of Cornell. Interesting story that I have to tell as an amateur history buff here about Snowden and Neville. So South Park is also home of the Oliver Miller homestead, which it was one of the key sites of the Whiskey Rebellion that happened back in the early days of American history when
right. It was like the 1700s, right?
yeah, yep, yeah, late 1700s when Alexander Hamilton, being Secretary of the Treasury, tried to put on a tax on whiskey distillers to raise revenue for the government, and that didn't go over very well. So like an armed militia formed in southwestern Pennsylvania, and they actually had to send like government troops out to combat the rebellion. But James Neville, of whom Neville Island and Neville Township was eventually named, was one of the key figures on the U.S. government side. I don't remember exactly what his role was, if he was like a magistrate or something like that, but he was one of the key enforcers. So the residents of what is now South Park and surrounding areas in the South Hills marched on Neville's house, and they tarred and feathered someone. I don't remember if he was the one they tarred and feathered or if it was somebody else. You can go read about the Whiskey Rebellion if people are interested. But at any rate, I think this is interesting because Snowden Township, home of the Oliver Miller homestead, where the Whiskey Rebellion started, beat Neville, named after the guy who was one of the government enforcers against the Whiskey Rebellion. Like 150 years later, they meet in a championship game. So interesting little bit of history there.
And I'm sure there were probably some relatives of each family out on that football field, right?
It's possible. It's entirely possible. So actually I did, if you go to steelcityblitz.com and search for my tour of the WPIAL, that I try and go to games and
Search
write
for
up a little
birth
bit.
certificates of the Snowdens and
Yeah.
Nevilles.
Well, I went to a South Park game last year, and when I go to games, I usually try and do a little write up about the history of the town and the game that I went to and all that stuff. So there's some tidbits on that in the town history section of that. So if people want to read it, check out my tour of the WPIAL article on South Park that I did last year.
We're just gonna have to like do more of these, and stuff. So
yeah. So for those that have enjoyed hearing me talk and want to hear me talk more, if you want to hear me talk about the Steelers and maybe swear a little bit about how they're playing right now, especially on defense, tune into the Steel City Blitz podcast on Thursday nights. So it airs Thursday nights, 10 o'clock, live on YouTube. You can join our live chat, just like on this show. You can join the live chat here, ask us any questions, but we have a very robust live chat during that show, so feel free to tune in. I will warn you, it's a little bit more PG-13 or maybe adult
it's a
rated
lot of
than this
four-letter
show is.
words, my understanding,
Yes,
reading some of the transcripts.
There's a lot of four-letter words, yes, but I just I like to warn people. It's a different vibe than this show.
Oh yes, it's definitely like YouTube, whether it's yes or no for is it suitable for kids?
It
I
is
mean,
not suitable for
it's
children.
not suitable.
Not suitable for children. Definitely a different vibe. And
Yeah.
then your fresh set
My
of
fresh
downs.
set of downs.
Yeah.
Look, and I'm just being honest. It's really been difficult because of my duties at PennLive. Normally Mondays are my day off at PennLive. Sundays and Mondays are my days off. The rest of the time I'm broadcasting games or have to be available for that. So it's been difficult to really kind of carve out a time to do fresh set of downs. So we may end up just bringing it back for the playoffs when my live streaming kind of dies down or that. So that's really been the reason for fresh set of downs is it's a hiatus, is trying to find a night that I'm available to do the podcast. So I'm a
I
busy man.
understand. Yes, it's life gets busy. What can I say?
That's right.
All right.
Life
So
gets busy broadcasting football games.
it does. Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight on our show. As I mentioned, you can follow us on social media. Check out my articles on steelcityblitz.com. We'll have another Games of the Week preview coming this week, as well as my WPIAL standings page. And we'll be running through all the standings coming up next week here on this show after we get a couple more games under our belt. Thanks to Coach John Core from Avonworth for joining us tonight. Really glad we got to talk to him. It was a great,
was a pleasure.
15 minutes he was able to give us. That's awesome. I really appreciate all the time that, coaches give us. They're busy guys and a lot of them do more than just coaching too, right? That they're teachers at schools. They have other jobs, other things that
they have families.
They have families. Yeah, absolutely. So very, very appreciative to him and everyone who watches the show. So thank you everyone. And we will be back next week with more.
All right. Well, listen, thanks to everybody. And we'll be back next week, Monday night, 9:30 for the WPIAL Blitz. So for Ian, I'm Badge. See you next week.